Dr. Rosalind Austin, host of the Researcher Revealed podcast. This is where we go behind the title of the paper or the presentation to find out more about the researcher who's leading that piece of work. On today's episode, we have Dr. Loreena Hill from the School of Nursing and Midwifery at Queen's University in Belfast joining us. She's going to tell us how she got into research and why her research is focused on the management of people who've got chronic heart failure. I hope you enjoy. Episode, we have the very esteemed Loreena Hill joining us. Loreena, can you introduce yourself to everybody?
Thank you. I'm very privileged to be here and very humbled when you start and call me esteemed. So my name is Dr. Loreena Hill. I've got the official title. And I work as a researcher, or a reader is my official title, in Queen's University in Belfast, which is the north of Ireland. And my previous background was I was a specialist heart failure nurse for quite a number of years in the Belfast Trust.
Oh, excellent. So Irish, I think you're the first person who, first guest from Ireland. So another country on my list. Woohoo!
Super.
I'm trying to travel around the world.
I'm wearing green in respect.
Love it. Perfect. Right. So Loreena, we are going to start today off with the Rapid 11. I don't know if you've listened to previous episodes or not, and it's okay, but we're gonna dive straight in. So okay. First question, are you a Windows or Mac user?
Windows.
Are you a tea or coffee drinker?
Coffee.
When you're writing, music or silence?
Silence.
Ooh, okay, controversial. What time of day are you most productive? So not like the hour, but like morning, noon.
Evening.
Ooh.
I'm an evening. Okay. I wrote most of my PhD probably when everybody was asleep. Because I would have been a worker till about 2, 3 in the morning. Yeah. And I had most of my thoughts and ideas when I'm out walking my dog.
Oh, nice. Very cool. Where do you tend to work, home or office?
Currently home quite a lot, but I would prefer the office. But where I live, which is in the north coast, if you know the north of Ireland, it's about an hour's drive from Queen's University. So therefore, if I've maybe only one meeting, I will work at home. If I've more and need some dedicated time away from the dog and anybody else who's in my house, I go to the office.
Okay, nice. So a bit of a combination then. What is your favorite referencing management system?
EndNote.
EndNote. You're among the majority there. And what about when it comes to creating figures, graphs, things like that? What's your favorite data visualization tool?
Oh, I wouldn't really have anything particular. I don't start on computer when I'm creating a visual. I will start pen and paper and draw it on a piece of paper and then try and put it into some sort of graphic design tool. But I usually will use pen and paper.
Wow, that's cool. I love that. I wish I was that artistic. Very cool. Right. What about a snack at your desk? Do you have a favorite desk snack?
Ooh, bananas. I eat quite a lot of bananas.
So my reason for my excitement is, so I'm keeping track of everybody's answers because I'm a researcher. You can't not do something with data. And so far, there's a surprising amount of researchers who snack on a banana.
Bananas.
It's really interesting.
Bananas with yeah, but I have to have a banana first thing in the morning. I probably would need to get my potassium checked at some point, but it probably is through the roof. But yeah.
Until you start having palpitations, why worry, right?
Fine.
When you're planning or organizing, so whether that's a structure of a paper or whether that's like your work life, are you a pen and paper person or a digital person?
Probably pen and paper first thoughts, yeah. Because I usually end up getting my ideas not when I'm sitting consciously thinking. I would
Mm-hmm.
get just a sporadic idea when I might walking the dog or when I'm doing my housework, doing washing the floor. I'll go, oh yeah, that's really good. That's an important point. And I'll have a book assigned to each project and I'll scribble something down. And then when I have
Ah,
designated time, then when I sit and really consciously have to write, then
yeah.
I will reflect on my ideas.
Nice. I love it. I'm a pen and paper person as well. I'm scribbling away.
Yep.
I can't not
No.
help myself. Right, two more questions. What book are you currently reading?
I am actually not reading any book at the minute. I'm not. I wouldn't be. I used to read a lot more books, but I actually don't read, which is really bad. Um, so I can't. What
It's
book did I
okay.
last? Yeah,
There's so
I
there's
will
no
listen to a lot.
judgment. There's no judgment. And I find it really interesting whether or not people read for themselves, whether they read for others, whether they don't read at all. I love reading. And so again, secretly, I asked the question to get book ideas.
Oh, right, okay.
There's no other reason behind it.
Yeah, I guess it's because I read all day, I read
Mm,
manuscripts all day, every day, and read
yeah.
chapters all day, every day. That when it comes to the nighttime, I need to want to refocus my eyes. So my thing is walking. So
Nice.
yeah.
Nice. I love that. That's really cool. Right, last question. Who is a researcher you admire?
Ah, there's so many. There's so many. My all-time um person model that I always looked up to was Teenie Asmar. Because she is the god of nursing and heart failure. Um, so she would probably be the one that I
Yeah.
would look up. I hope she doesn't hear this. This is embarrassing. But I did get an award from the HFA to travel over to Linköping to
Yeah.
spend a week with them, and I remember going over thinking, "Oh my gosh, this is great." And she's been such a support to me. So yeah, I guess I will say that.
I similarly have only recently got to meet her. Previously, I read her papers, read her work, and I kind of held held her up for her prolificency and the detail that she writes to and the quality that she writes as this I had this total picture of her in my mind of and then I met her and she's not at all what I imagined. I was really intimidated by her and she's so warm and so lovely and like you say so supportive of
Mhm.
other nurses who are trying to do research within the field. It just put her
Mhm.
another
Mhm.
step above for me. So
Yeah. Yeah.
totally agree with that conclusion. Right, that's our rapid 11. Thank
Okay.
you so much. So the first question I always ask everybody is you said in the introduction that you were a heart failure nurse in Belfast at Queen's University Hospital. So how on earth have you gone from being a heart failure nurse, working with patients every day, to being a leading researcher in cardiovascular?
Um, Very strangely, very
Okay.
not,
Oh, I
it
love a good
wasn't a
story.
path. It was never a path that I wanted to do. So it wasn't in my career profile that I wanted to be a researcher. I think back and I always held Queen's University in high regard and always wanted to go there as a student nurse, but never thought I would ever work there. And basically, what happened, I had just completed my master's dissertation looking at patients who have advanced heart failure and when they should be considered for palliative care. And this was back in 2006. And during that time, I was working away as a specialist nursing clinic, and I met and was inspired by so many patients. And I mean, I learned so much from them and their families. And one of the daughters of one of my lovely patients nominated me for an RCN award, Patient Choice. So we went that night. I had no, I was very humbled to be nominated. The patient and her daughter and myself and a colleague went, and I won the award. I was completely overwhelmed with it. It was just completely so surprising and so privileged, and it was lovely to have the patient with me when I won that. And during that night when we were celebrating with bubbles, I was met by two ladies. One of them works in the R&D office in Belfast Public Health Authority, and she said to me, "Oh, you should do your PhD. You'd be a great researcher." And I sort of laughed and went, "Yeah, someday. Yeah, right." And then I met Donna Fitzsimons, Professor Donna Fitzsimons, who worked in the Ulster at that stage. And she said to me, "I know you've done your master's. You've got, a great career profile there. I know you have, and you enjoy your clinical work, but have you ever thought about doing research?" And again, and this was in the June, again, I laughed and went, "No, no, no." I don't really know what happened over the summer. I don't know whether it's because I went to Thorpe Park and went on a couple of Big Dippers or something. But when I came back in August, I thought I'm going to apply for an R&D fellowship. I applied for an R&D fellowship in October of the same year. I got the award in February. So that was 2012, and I started my PhD in September 2012. And what settled me was I would do my PhD, that would settle me, and I would just do it and go back into clinical practice. And that was always my intention. So I completed in 2015. I then got a postdoc, and all of a sudden I realized I love finding things out. I'm inquisitive and I love, the research that I was doing was very close to my heart anyway, because it was patients with an ICD, advanced heart failure. And I thought this will I'm seeing 5 or 6 patients at a clinic and hopefully making a difference, but research could make a bigger difference. So I then went back to practice for about a year and was disappointingly unsettled, and tried to do some part-time research, part-time heart failure. It was too difficult. And then in 2019, 2018, took the jump to go into full-time research in Queen's University. I love it. I love my job. I love the research. I love finding things out and trying to figure things out and hopefully making a difference. And I love the current research that I'm doing. In the past couple of months, missed clinical practice so much. I now do a Monday morning clinic in a trust close by. So I'm now getting the ideal job, which I always wanted, which was still a foot in clinical practice, but my big love of doing research.
So you're
But
a
in terms of a
proper
clear
clinical
pathway,
academic.
yeah,
Sorry?
in terms of a clear pathway, it was just having conversations, putting a spark in somebody's head and going, could I? Do you think so? Could I do it? And going from there.
Oh, I love it. I love um the Thorpe Park rides being the thing that pushed you over the edge. Well, no, I don't say that derisively. I actually mean that because research is such a roller coaster ride. You really do have to um, be willing
Yeah,
to experience those extreme
yeah,
highs, but also
yeah,
those extreme lows
yeah,
in as a researcher. And I think,
yeah,
if you loved Thorpe Park, then maybe research is right for you.
exactly. And I have continually this imposter syndrome of going, somebody at some time will wake up and go, what is she talking about? What is she doing? That research means nothing. So, my comfortable area is clinical practice because I can do X, Y, and I can see an immediate difference. Research is different, and you're not, it's years when you're doing a project that you actually can say that you're making any impact. So, I'm continually troubled with feeling going, I'm out of my depths here. What am I doing in this area? Yeah, so.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for being brave enough to share that, because I think people people often look at what researchers, especially researchers who are rarer, so nurses, OTs, physios, like those non-medics, those people who aren't doing those big drug studies the drug companies get all excited about, things like that. I think we often experience what you're talking about, but we are shyer or more
Mm,
hesitant to say it out loud. So
hmm
thank you for being brave in saying that, because I think it's a really important thing to realize. And I love how you word it, that research is uncomfortable, and some of that uncomfortability is that delayed gratification that
hmm
research means. Because and how do you know you've made an
hmm
impact,
hmm So you
right?
could have done all this, yeah, and you could do loads of work and actually, it doesn't change anything. But to me, if it even changes one person's awareness, so I know from my PhD that I've changed people's, I've made people think, and that can be enough rather than, reducing mortality and reducing hospitalizations. If it just even stops and makes people think. I must also say, even as a nurse researcher, I have been privileged to be supported by amazing medical colleagues who have, as I would say, had my back,
Yeah.
um, directed me, advised me, supported me, um, through a lot of stuff. And I still am really grateful for the clinical colleagues that I have where I previously worked, and also the ones I've met along the way in the HFA. I have never felt, they've never made me feel, oh, you're a nurse researcher. They have made me feel as if, your opinion does, what do you think? What's your thoughts as a nurse?
Mm.
Because for some reason they're aware that us as nurses have different perspectives on things.
Mm.
So um, they do invite those comments.
No, I agree. I think, and it might be because of my own varied educational background, but I really believe that the more viewpoints you have about a certain issue, so having a proper interdisciplinary team that's informing your research project or delivering your research project, and I mean that not just professional disciplines, but like people disciplines as well, so having patients involved, having carers
Mm,
involved, it
mm,
it I think it enables you to get that much closer to what the reality is, because reality is so complex that if
mm,
you only look at it through a single perspective,
mm.
then you're not going to get that same depth and richness that if you have a 360 view, personally. But
No, no, completely agree. And that's why it's great to see a lot of, and it's something that, in my most recent research project, I am co-designing, which we call co-designing
oh,
the
nice.
intervention. And I have about 12, 13 patients with an ICD who have really helped inform what this digital intervention will look like. And their thoughts have been absolutely amazing, and their perspectives and their requests, and they're like going, it'd be great if you could do, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, that really makes sense. So, this whole co-design and the push for co-design in research, and the inclusion of patients. So I know the ESC has done a lot of work on that in terms of the ESC patient forum, but patients have a powerful voice, and often they feel as if that voice shouldn't and can't be heard, but really we should. And often the vehicles to do that is ourselves as nurses. We're the main ones that sort of see them and listen to them quite a lot. So yeah, I would be a very a fan of doing developing interventions that were in co-design with patients, managers, other colleagues, not just in a research tower.
Right. So we're going to rewind a little bit because I think we need
Okay.
to unpick that because you threw out a lot of terms that I think are really important to talk about. So first off, what is this project that you're talking about, that you're doing this intervention? Explain the project first.
Okay. So, so following on from my PhD, which was exploring patients' perceptions of deactivating an implantable cardiac defibrillator when they have advanced heart failure. And from that exploratory work, I found that a lot of patients weren't well informed and weren't knowledgeable about their ICD. I did some postdoc work on that, looking at what information they needed. And then I applied in 2019 for a British Heart Foundation Career Development Fellowship. And the purpose of this would be that it would give me time, dedicated time, to develop an intervention for patients with an ICD. So in 2019, I spent days of my life, weeks of my life developing this grant, putting it in February 2020. Bear in mind the date, February 2020, I got reject. I got major revision. So I was
Okay.
like, loads of comments, loads of useful comments when I think back on it. And then we went into lockdown because we had COVID hit in the February, March 2020. So the proposal went on the shelf and it sat there. I went back into clinical practice over COVID and worked then. Completely put it out of my head, thought, oh, well, that one's dead in the water. Never look at that again. I've just lost days of my life. And then I pulled it back out again in 2020. Let me get this right, 2021, the end of 2021. And thought, right, well, I actually was pushed to pull it back out again. I will say that. I was told, would you just revise that and get it in? So again, spent days of my life revising this grant, put it in, and it was accepted and approved. And I
Okay.
commenced the project, the BHF project, in February 2023. It's a 3-year fellowship.
Yeah.
It pays for 70% of my salary, which is great. And what I'm developing is a digital app for patients with an ICD to
Mm-hmm.
provide them information and support all about their device. So we have
Nice.
things about what is an ICD, what is a cardiac resynchronization therapy with an ICD,
Yeah.
um, what are myths that are about an ICD, what are the actual facts about an ICD. I have a number of patients who have, we have a short 3-minute films on them talking about life with an ICD.
Nice.
What does a shock feel like? We have them giving their input of how they go over the anxiety of receiving an ICD, what they
Mm-hmm.
did in terms of walking, what they did in terms of mindfulness. So it's all in an app which
Nice.
will hopefully be pilot tested in Belfast Trust, in
Mm-hmm.
addition to Glasgow, Roy Gardner
Oh,
in
nice.
Glasgow,
Nice.
by the end of the year with 128 patients.
Mm-hmm.
If proved successful, then um, I'm hoping that we will put in for another grant then to do a larger multi-central randomized trial. So
Nice.
it's been a real learning curve in terms of looking at software and what software can do and the digital form and the perspective of patients and perspective of I have got electrophysiologists involved, I have got cardiac physiologists involved, I have
Nice.
nurses involved. So my last meeting, there was about 20 something
Oh,
contributors. So I'm really excited. It to me, it's probably what I'm really proud of, and
yeah.
I'm just hoping yeah, that it makes a difference.
That's incredible. That sounds so cool. Um, that you've got like so many people inputting on it and you're getting ready to like chuck it out there into the world to then start to see what sort of a difference it makes. Before we talk about the difference it might make or that you're going to try and capture, two more questions. First one's quite quick. It's just again because this goes out to the general public. What is an ICD? Can you tell everybody what an
Yeah.
ICD is?
All right. So an ICD is like a small electromagnetic box. I'm pointing to my left side because it's usually implanted just below the left clavicle. It's implanted if for people who have had like a heart attack and then they've got heart failure. And it's usually implanted as a prevention, a primary prevention. So if they have like a life-threatening arrhythmia or they go into VT or VF, as you would see in casualty, it will shock them internally. Or it could be implanted after somebody has had a cardiac event on the football pitch or whatever. They will have this small device goes in. Its main role is to shock the
Yeah.
rhythm or the heart back into normal rhythm again.
So internal cardiac defibrillator.
Defibrillator. Yeah,
So the
and
same
it's,
thing that
yeah,
like if you're out in the public and somebody collapses down and you hear people yelling to get a defibrillator, it's a miniature version of that doesn't require somebody to attach leads.
absolutely, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you. You know, I know this, but at the same time, it's always like somebody out there might not. So that's
Yeah,
that. So you've got your big project, you've developed it all. Now, the reason why I asked you to tell us about the project is you use this term of co-design. What does that mean?
yeah. So it literally means that you're co-designing it with patients and other colleagues. You're not
Okay.
sitting on your research ivory tower developing this intervention, thinking it's wonderful, only to find out it's not wonderful at all. So whenever I was even writing on my pen and paper,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what the potential intervention would look like, I had a number of informal meetings with patients, going, do you think this is a good idea? If you had an app, would you use an app? Would it be better having an in-person, something in person,
Yeah.
or is it better having something on your phone? So there's a lot of informal questions. There was a lot of input from patients and cardiologists and nurses in the grant proposal, even before we started to
Okay.
develop it
Yeah.
in that grant proposal, letting them read what I had thought we were going to develop and seeing whether they thought it's actually acceptable in practice. So if they were sitting in a clinic and they seen somebody who was awaiting an ICD or had just had an ICD, would this be something they would suggest, or would they say, and if they did say, would it require them to spend 10 minutes describing the intervention, or could they say it in a very short space of time,
Okay.
that it wouldn't impact their practice? So then, as soon as the grant came in, as soon as we then knew we had the money to proceed, the first thing we had was a stakeholder meeting where we got everybody together to decide what the content of the device would look like. So what
Okay.
we decided, it's going to be a digital app. What will be in it? What's the must-haves and what's the nice to have, but may not be
Okay.
feasible. And then we had some pictures up. We showed them pictures of what it could potentially look like in terms of its the app looks like a big balloon. So it's a big balloon that
Okay.
goes up into the sky. So those types of visuals.
Okay.
And then then they got this was agreed. Then it came back in. Then we began to develop a prototype of
Yeah.
the app. Then it went back out to the 10 patients, a number of medical staff, a number of researchers to look at it, play with it, give me feedback on it. It came back in again,
Okay.
changed it
So
again, back out again. It's
it's
all
this
iterative,
it's a real
continual.
continual process. So from your point, where does the line go where you transition into co-design versus this other thing that researchers talk about all the time of patient and public involvement? So how are the two different?
So there would be at the start that patient and public involvement was clear in the grant. So they were
Mhm.
giving their advice and opinions. But whenever it moves into this co-design, they're actually physically going on testing the app
Ah,
itself, giving me feedback,
okay.
going, that didn't work. I don't like that.
Okay.
In my experience. So I guess it's more, they're very similar. They're very closely aligned
Mm,
in a very research term, PP, in my very simplistic manner, PPI would be more advising. However, whenever you're entering co-design, you're doing more than just giving your opinion and advising. You're literally going in, testing something, giving your outcomes, which could inform something else, and being a more active participant.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Because
Very simplistic description of my
no, but there's
understanding.
nothing, I don't think there's anything wrong with simplistic. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in trying to make things sound fancy, that the meaning gets lost. And I think, like, for me, I've done quite a lot of PPI work, and I started in my PhD with a few projects to start to label something that I was calling like sense checking with them, where I was actually getting them to go over some of the qualitative analysis that I did. So for example, in my big literature review that I did, I went through pre-existing data that had already been published, and I would label things with a symptom. So somebody would say in the interview transcript, I'm out of puff. So I'd label that as breathlessness, kind of thing. But because, like you said, and like I said earlier, I don't believe that, like, I know everything and that I can interpret everything properly and correctly. So I got my PPI group together, and I basically pitched it to them like a word game. And I said, I gave them all of these sheets, and I said, this is what I've called it. These are all of the segments of text that made me group them together. And they really did help me make sense of them. And we, like, shifted some of them around and pushed them, changed them slightly, or changed how I'd worded them to make it so that it was something they felt was true to their own lived experiences. And that's why I was asking the question about that co-design, because I didn't really feel like those activities were design, but at the same time, like, they definitely shifted how I published and what I wrote about and how I thought about things. And I felt like it went a bit beyond PPI, but there wasn't really a term for it. And so I've labeled it now, and I do it quite frequently. I call it sense checking. So I take my results, my interpretation of those results to people that have it, and I say, does this, I think this, what do you think? Does this make sense to your own lived experience? To kind of keep them in that recurrent loop. But I haven't taken that real difference to me and what you're saying you do and what co-design is actually getting that input at an earlier stage in the research process to then shape or change, how the colors that you use, the format of your application, stuff like that. So it's really helpful. Thank you. I might have to label this episode as Masterclass on Co-Design.
No.
Right. Okay. So that's your co-design bit. So this grant that got kicked to the curb once, but you really did it. Who is this, like a because you're in Ireland, so you don't have access to the National Institute for Health and Research that we have here in the UK. Is that correct, or do you?
Can.
Oh, you do.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
There's a number of program grants are coming up that are now available. They used to not all be available to residents in Northern Ireland, but they're now opening that up, and we should get access to them all. So I think I don't, in terms of my choice of funder for the grant, I didn't sort of consciously go in and think, okay, I'm not doing an NIHR grant, I'm going for BHF. I think I had a natural incline to apply for BHF because of the BHF Career Fellowship and the prestige that holds within the university setting. And also reflecting back on my own clinical career, when I was a heart failure nurse, I was adopted, what we call adopted by the BHF as a BHF adopted heart failure nurse. It didn't mean anything salary wise, but this was something that they wanted. So I had an affiliation with the BHF, and therefore I was willing to throw my hat in the ring and go, okay, I'm going to try for this. Like, let's go for the top of the game, like, and work my way down. And and thinking about that time, and I think there was a big learning in that, because I have learned a lot from that initial rejection, in that you get it, you look at it, and you throw it in the corner and go, go out, take a walk, scream at the dog, do whatever you need to do to get it out of your system. But leave it. My thing is, I leave it for a few weeks or months, and then pull it back out again. And then you can actually objectively see what the reviewer is talking about and agree with what the reviewer is talking about and really improve the grant. So, yes, there was COVID, and yes, it nearly took me 18 months later, but it did really improve the overall grant, and I've seen that in even sort of any manuscripts I've put in for journals. The reviewers are not out to get people. They really want to publish your work. They are really wanting to make sure that your manuscript is the best it can be. So whenever you get your reviewer comment, cry silently in the corner, but then come out and turn the computer back on again and go, okay, let's listen to this person.
Oh my goodness. So I feel like I'm having a therapy session here because literally, like, the timing of you saying this is so crazy because literally at the beginning of this, no, end of last week, I finally, I don't know if you've heard the phrase or not, ate my toad. So it's like this phrase. I went to a writing thing and they talk about you have this toad on your desk. So this thing that you need to
Okay.
write, you need to fix, but you ignore it and ignore it. And the more you ignore it, the bigger the toad and the uglier it gets. And the more you're like, ooh, I don't want to touch that. So it's this phrase of eating my toad. And I
It's like an
have this,
elephant in the room, like an elephant
yeah,
in the room.
same. And I had this really big reject. Well, it was the third time it got rejected. Let's be honest. I had this
Oh,
third really tough rejection on this, like the last sort of like paper from my PhD that sort of integrated everything together. And I've ignored it for about 18 months because I just like, I mean, I'd look at it and I'd see the reviewer comments and I'd just be like, I'd have to put it back down again. But
close
I
it down.
finally have rewritten it and it's currently sitting with my PhD supervisor just to be like, have I
Good.
ruined it now? Um, so that I can get it submitted again. But it's such a hard knock, those rejections, because you've poured so much into
Mhm.
it. And I think, like, for me, being a little bit earlier in my journey than what you're at, it's so reassuring to know that that necessarily isn't just because I'm new. If that sounds like a
Mm.
weird thing to say,
Mm.
that it actually keeps happening and that they aren't out to get you, even though I would argue when it comes to reviewer two.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I
But
wonder I wonder if on an editorial board, if you've gotten a review, your two reviews in, and you actually have a nice reviewer two, whether or not they swap it so that reviewer two myth stays the
and
same.
they're always yeah, because it always is reviewer two gives the most, like, pages of comments. And yeah, I don't know why that is, because it was the same in my grant. It was like an awful lot. And I was going, can I read their words and think, who is saying that? Can I hear those words anywhere? Because I'm going to get them. I know I would. um, but it is tough. It is tough, and rejection happens the whole way. And I think in research, particularly coming from a clinical environment where this type of you never encountered this before, and particularly you're spending so much time, and you're actually going. You should be so pleased that you're reading my work. Never mind. Oh my goodness, you've just rejected my work. Um, so yeah.
You should be so pleased you're even reading it.
That's my thoughts. You should be so pleased that you get an opportunity to read my work.
Except, do you not
And then,
realize the genius? And then, like, for
yeah,
me, then I calm down and I reread the sentence. And I'm like, oh, I spelled the
yeah,
wrong.
yeah,
Maybe they have a point.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I completely agree.
Oh, that's brilliant. Right. So that BHF grant, which a little birdie has told me, means that you are the only nurse to receive this type of grant from the BHF in Ireland. So
Thank you.
Northern Ireland, sorry, Northern Ireland. Very well done. And it's huge. Like, that's such a massive win, because I too, like, being cardiovascular, I'm like, I hold the BHF is higher than the NIHR as well. Shh, don't tell the NIHR this. And I looked up, which is why I use the word eminent at the beginning of the introduction, because I look up to people like you and people like Barbara Farquharson, who are some of the first nurses to have ever received a BHF grant. And the BHF, so the British Heart Foundation, for everybody who's not in the UK, it typically tends to award more fellowships and research grants to bench science, so cells, rats, mice. And so as a nurse, to be given a grant from that body, to me, is just like
Mm-hmm. And they have. So I have already sort of they came over to Queen's University a few months ago,
oh
and I did
wow.
meet the new director, and I sort of cornered him already, going, okay, my grant will complete in 2026. I'll now have this potentially feasible and acceptable app. What do you advise? And he was very open and said, okay, you
Ah.
can apply for the next. So I'm hoping that my perception that my foot's in the door, I can just give it another push and get another grant from them. That, please don't shoot me down. But so I do think that I am hoping that hopefully that they'll be able then to support the next step, which will then really push the app into clinical practice.
Oh, fingers crossed. Fingers
Yeah.
crossed. Go girl, because I'm following in your steps. So like, if somebody else can manage to do it, then that helps inspire me as well. So excellent. So you're doing your research. You also lecture. You also work now clinically 1 day a week. And then you're also on committees for the European Society of Cardiology in Heart Failure Association. So hard to get the acronyms out in the right way. So what is that role about, and what are you hoping that that adds to your already what sounds like crazy busy life?
Um, so I became the nurse representative of the Heart Failure Association board in 2016, which
Mm-hmm.
is like a lifetime away. And I stayed on the board and was actually elected into the executive board of the HFA. So I was this little nurse in among these high, very eminent cardiology researchers like Professor Andrew Coates, like Professor Peter Severovich, like the current, Marco Metra, all very, very supportive, all really supportive. During the time that I was in the executive board, I was secretary, so I was like reviewing minutes and minutes of each board meeting and doing any of those admin things. But I also was co-chairing with Tini Asmar the Patient and Care Committee, which was a
Oh,
great committee. And our role was to look at those to look at the practical elements in clinical practice, to see how we could standardize the care of our heart failure patients across Europe.
right. Yeah.
So we were looking things at very practical things like, do they all get the blood test called NT/proBNP? Do they all get certain self-care education? So there's lots of things.
Mm,
Um, Part of my big remit is to keep nursing and a heart failure nurse's role stamped into, we are so important in the
mm,
care of patients with heart failure.
yeah.
And I would be really passionate about that. So we've just completed, it's just gone into the European Journal of Heart Failure, a large European survey of heart failure nurses across Europe, looking at the role, looking at how that role has tentatively developed. Certainly there's a lot more of us, but looking at it,
Mm,
how it's developed from just not giving that education on diet and exercise and fluid
mm,
intake, But right now, to a lot of our nurses are now prescribing medication,
Mm-hmm.
increasing their medication, initiating medication, organizing echocardiograms, organizing investigations. So to me, that's the reason for staying in the HFA is I want to sort of fly the flag of going, we are important, the heart failure
Yeah.
nurses, we are a really important part of the team, and I want to make sure our voices are heard. So that the mandate for the 2024 finished in August or finishes in August. So my role as co-chair with Professor or Ekaterina was the co-chair of the Digital Health and Patient Care Committee that finishes, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm now being asked to co-chair the Heart and Brain Committee of the
Ooh.
HFA. So I look forward to the challenge that starts in September 2024 and runs to 2026.
Okay, so exciting times to come then. For the new role in heart and brain, what are you hoping, especially like as a nurse researcher who's passionate about maintaining that heart failure nurse role, Europe-wide, what are you hoping that you will add to that committee that's unique to who you are with all of your diverse specialities that you have now?
Yeah. So my whenever I think of heart and brain, I think of not just brain but mind and
Mm,
psychology. And I'm
yeah.
thinking we often, and we don't in clinical practice, assess patients' quality of life, depression, anxiety, cognitive. So there is something about developing those what we call patient-reported outcome measures, that, how important and valuable are they, that they shouldn't always just be a secondary outcome measure in a lot of the trials. So I'm
Mm.
hoping to really look, to look at those a bit more in detail and how important it is, how psychology inside that brain aspect and cognitive ability inside that brain aspect of this committee is so important for the healthy functioning of heart and maintaining of self-care and heart failure.
Oh, I love it. I love that. I think it's so important. And I think like two things of what you've just said. One, heart failure nurses are definitely important, and we've got research to prove that. There's like 2 or 3 studies now that actually show we're better than the doctors as well. Just
Support.
saying. um that but also like that I agree with you. So it was one of the main things that propelled me into my PhD was that heart and mind connection that I feel is, and I don't think it's purposeful. I think, we've all read and know the stats in the UK about how there's not enough specialist staff, how there's this huge tsunami of people who have heart failure that is already, hitting us, and it's only going to get, the waves are
Yeah,
getting bigger
yeah,
as the sets are lining up.
yeah.
Um, and I think, we've had to, nurses and doctors have had to streamline
Mm,
our consultations. And I think it's one of those things, like it's in the guidelines. Everybody knows it's important. Everybody recognizes that quality of life and mental health is a
mm,
key feature to how patients are going to engage and how they feel about their treatment and how it adds to their overall
mm,
treatment burden. But it's like you say, it's not, patients know it's important, nurses know it's important, and I would argue doctors know it's important, but yet in research studies, what's the number one primary outcome in every single study? Yep, are you alive or dead? And to me, to me, I'm like, that's kind of inevitable.
yeah.
So why don't we shift the focus to something that matters to
Mm,
those people, and that being, you know, that heart and mind connection, like what matters to them. Are they able to do the things they want to do? How can our interventions improve their ability to do the things they want to do? And to really focus on a much more not so death focused.
Yeah, yeah. I guess mortality is so easy to count. I know that sounds terrible, but it's countability. It's
Yeah,
counting.
it's
It's so
true.
easy to count. And the same as hospitalization, so easy to count.
Yeah.
While as quality of life is so variable. Like today, this morning, I was so tired and or I could probably, if somebody had given me a Kansas City cardiomyopathy question, I would have went, ugh. But now I've had my coffee, I've had this lovely podcast. Yeah, my quality of life. So it varies through the day. So I
Yeah.
guess that's why it makes it more difficult. However, despite it being more difficult, shouldn't make it not be of value.
Yeah. Oh, mic drop moment. No, seriously, I'm not. Oh, it's been so lovely to chat to you. And I've just looked at the time, and we probably need to start closing
Okay.
things up because it's just flown by. Because I feel seen and heard.
Have I?
No, I feel seen and
Oh,
heard.
okay.
So much of what you have said rings so true to my own experience and to my own belief systems. And it's just been really, really lovely. So thank you so much for coming and for sharing the truth behind your journey and the fact you didn't want to be a researcher at all. And here you are. Um, is there any last words, pearls of wisdom that you'd like to drop before we say bye for now?
No, I guess it's like one of those things. So one thing that I have learned is is to if you see somebody and you want to speak to them and they are a researcher, say hello. Because, people will say, oh, I seen you here or I seen you in the Prague or I seen you and I'm going, why did you not stop and speak? I may always look as if I'm like have a mission, but if I don't have time, I'll say not. But I think one of my pearls of wisdom that I've learned all along is, researchers want to share what their journey has been and what they're doing. So if you meet me or any of them, stop and say hello.
Oh, perfect. Well, that's how we met, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Excellent. For everybody out there listening, if you really enjoyed hearing about Dr. Loreena Hill's research, in the description, I will put some details where you can follow her on social media, some of her more recent publications or ones that she'd really like to highlight. So dive into there and check it out. And thank you very much for listening. And we will be back in another 3 weeks. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Don't go away. Up next, we have the top 3 takeaways from this week's podcast by Dr. Rosalind Austin. So you might have picked up, I do admire Dr. Loreena Hill quite a lot, and I actually followed her advice before she even gave it. Back in May, we were both at the Heart Failure Association conference in Lisbon, and I just approached her, and I'm so glad that I did, because not only did she agree to be a part of that podcast, but she's now had a full-length podcast featuring herself. The more I talk to her, the more that I just respect and admire her. She's so authentic and so passionate, and she has a real ability to make things very understandable. So I really appreciated her coming and being a guest on this episode. Right. My top 3 takeaway, and I've struggled a bit with this because there were so many. I think I've got about 5 written down as possible, but I've narrowed it down to my top 3. Top takeaways. The first one is her comment around research having the possibility to have bigger impact than what you can have as an independent clinician. As my top takeaway. And I think, like, for me, that was really powerful because her saying that comes from a real place of knowing. I've had like other people who have been, primarily academic for long periods of time. They haven't really, it's been ages since they've been in a clinical setting. But for Loreena, like she went into research hesitantly, not really having it as a purpose or a goal. And when she finished her PhD, you know, she tried to go back to full-time clinical and found it wasn't quite enough, because her experience doing research and through her PhD had really personally highlighted to her how much wider of an impact as a nurse she could have with research, rather than that individual, very powerful, but individual on a case-by-case interaction as a clinician. And I just thought that was a really interesting and weighty observation that she has, that she believes that research allows clinicians and people who lead research to have a larger impact than just an individual patient to clinician relationship. My second takeaway is that research is uncomfortable. And I said this in the podcast, when she was talking about rejections and how hard it was to pick stuff up again. I said, you know, it feels very therapeutic for me, because I've kind of been going through a really tough time at the minute with a couple of, well, one really big rejection. And it's just really reassuring to know that that uncomfortability isn't unique to me, that it is part of being a researcher, of going through this roller coaster ride of really, really high highs, but also low lows, and to have that assurance that that is a normal experience was really, really powerful for me. And I hope powerful for you too, that research can be an uncomfortable place to work. And not for bad reasons, just because it's the nature of the beast. Right. Takeaway number 3, the last takeaway, was she gave quite a really, I felt anyway, in-depth, but also understandable explanation of co-design, and where co-design differs from patient and public involvement, or PPI, as you might have read or heard about. And for me, her conclusion around the value of co-design is my third top takeaway, in that co-design is a way to give any intervention that you design, or any further piece of knowledge that you're researching, the best chance at being meaningful to those people who you're trying to impact. And I love that, because I said this in a previous podcast. I can remember my early introductions into research being like, well, why are we still asking this question 20 years on, when somebody back in the 70s, 60s has already answered it? And I think that's a real progress that the research community is making in general, is actually, you know, getting the people who you're trying to help through the research to be involved in your project. And whether that's as PPI, whether that's as co-designers, I think that depends on your ultimate goal and what you're trying to do. But I think, you know, hearing her project around this digital app to help inform and support people with heart failure who need to have this very technical piece of equipment in order to have a better experience and protect their life from their heart failure, you know, she's getting input from them in order to try and give this intervention its best chance at being really meaningful. And I can't wait to hear about how that app goes and the testing of it. So yeah, top takeaway number 3 is around co-design being a powerful way to give your whatever the best chance at being meaningful. That's it for today. I'm sure you are familiar, well, everybody who's been listening to this podcast for the last year should be familiar now that in the YouTube description or the episode notes, if you're listening to audio only, I'll put in more details around Loreena Hill, where she works, her research, things like that, so that you can get in touch. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Again, if you have specific questions, pop them on the YouTube video, because it's the easiest way for me to find and moderate them and to funnel them as appropriately to my guests. So that would be great. And I will see you all again I'll see you all again in about 3 weeks' time. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.